Hello, good morning. Today is October 30th, and Mars has just entered the sign of Scorpio, its own domicile, and the Sun has just perfected a square to Saturn and is now separating from it. I think today I'm mainly going to be focusing on the Sun square to Saturn, even though I'm a bit. Uh, I'm, I guess I'm not totally missing it, but I'm kind of coming at the after the perfection of it here. There's some other things that have been going on as well too, such as a sextile between Venus and Jupiter. My last video I made was on the topic of Venus um, hanging out with the South Node in the sign of Sagittarius, and the quality of the South Node creating a kind of um, black hole uh, of hunger and craving and sense of absence that perhaps I was being conscious of filling with consumeristic shopping habits and such. Um, One of the things I don't want to spend too much time on this, but leading into all this, I think it's useful to use as an example this stuff about me and my other hobby, which has to do with synthesizers and electronic music. I was sick for a while, and I was not making astrology videos, and I was also during this time when I was sick, I wasn't doing tarot. I Before I had this tarot practice where I would get up in the morning and I would pull a tarot card, or I don't know, because first I started just doing like one tarot card a day to like learn tarot, and then eventually it turned into like doing a 3 card spread every morning. Um, and when I got sick, like honestly, I mean, it started to be like I'd just pull like the tower card every day. Or like I pulled the tower, or you pulled death, or like it was just like it was not. I was getting sick, and it was reflecting that in the cards. Um, and started to be like, I don't know, I don't really see the point of this anymore. I know I'm going through a rough time. I don't need the cards to tell me that. Um, there's Another. I also listened to a podcast interview with a tarot reader. I hope I get her name right. I think her name is Camellia Elias, and she was actually had this point of view that was against doing the daily tarot reading, or to put it more in positive terms of what she was for rather than what she was against. She was for asking the tarot very to be she was recommending that people formulate very specific questions that they're asking, and to be as clear and precise with what are you actually asking in your question, and then you get a clear and precise answer based on that. And she was not so into this whole thing about just like doing a reading of the day without asking a question about it. And she was saying that you probably are asking a question when you're doing that. If you're like, the question could be, "How is my day gonna go?" or or maybe you have an appointment that's this day. Like, what's this appointment gonna be like that I have, or whatever it is, right? There usually there is a question that's kind of hidden in that in the daily reading. But like I said, I'm kind of changed my tarot practice now to maybe just focus more on specific questions. But the other thing too was that I find tarot work to be kind of stressful. Sometimes it's not like, I mean, I kind of enjoy playing around with this stuff, but there's something about I think it's an honest kind of like a tool for self illumination, and often we don't want to see our we don't it's often be tough having that kind of stuff illuminated for us. I think especially working with the tarot, they have cards that are specifically bad cards or difficult cards that may not always give you the positive affirmation that you're looking for. And I would just basically, when I was pulling the tarot card every day, I went to the hospital and I left my tarot cards behind. And I think even before I would have left the hospital, I stopped doing my daily tarot pull for a while. I stopped doing so much divination work. And in this time when I was sick, one of the things that I would do is that I would spend time on synthesizer YouTube basically and watch demo videos and reviews and stuff like this for different synthesizer electronic music products and such, just as a way to pass the time. And I realized that essentially it's all advertising. It's all kind of like a hype machine where they pay social media influencers, yes, they even exist in the synthesizer world, to hype up products and get people all excited and open their wallets and shell out their money on various things. And I was just not doing divination work, and I was doing a lot of this, and I kind of had it of my mind that I'm like, being told in the hospital I could die at any moment spontaneously and stuff like this. Like, what's the point? You can't take it with you. Might as well spend spend my money on synthesizers when I get out of here. But then I started to sort of question that. And to be honest, I'm not a kind of person who likes spending a lot of money. This is kind of a big long ramble about all, but I basically I once I started getting into divination work again, it's kind of like the bitter medicine that I basically like have not been getting very good readings on things to do with electronic music really at all. It's not very encouraging, and it kind of reminds me of like earlier this year. I was thinking about just like giving it up, putting it behind me, saying goodbye to Dan, the electronic musician, and then maybe putting my energies more into doing this channel, doing astrology stuff, trying to do get my business going of doing natal chart readings for people and shifting more in that direction, especially considering the fact that with COVID, it's I mean, they're starting to open up venues again and have shows, and there's one of my favorite bands for electronic gothy stuff, Boy Harsher, is booked for the Forbodden Festival in Vancouver for February. I could go see them again, but they've got to like so far in Vancouver at least. They're you can apparently they're gonna have shows, but you can't dance. So it's kind of like oh great, so like no dancing. And I don't know if they're gonna change that at some point in time, but it's still, to me, it doesn't really look like the most appropriate time for if you like rave music and stuff like that. And like I was like starting to reflect on this stuff. This brings me back to the actual point of making this video, which is Square Saturn, is that there's certain things that I'm becoming kind of aware of, which is the theme of the puer and the senex, which is to translate that for those who are not familiar, the puer is kind of like the Peter Pan syndrome of the eternal child, and the senex is the old man. In all the pros and cons that come with old age, it could be the grumpy old man or it could be the wise old man. They're both senex archetypes, and Saturn is the ultimate senex planet, or the ultimate senex character in mythology, being the old patriarch that doesn't want to give up his power to the younger generation. So Saturn kills all his children, eventually to be succeeded by Jupiter. There's something about all that, because I mean, I look pretty young for my age. I've got a young look to me, I would say. Still, I still get ID'd if I am to purchase things or get into places where that's necessary. But I was just thinking about, like, I got really into electronic dance music. I mean, I've always been in, to be honest, I was into it even since I was a little kid with, like, 90s electronica, like Square Pusher and The Prodigy and Aphex Twin, and, downloading stuff on the internet. Once I was in my, young 20s, then I was, like, going out partying and stuff like that. But, that's there's certain things that remind you that you're not really there anymore, and it's like quite a lot of time has passed since I'm thinking back in 2010. I went to Australia and I went to a bunch of bush duff, psytrance rave parties, and that is it's really interesting because that was on my last Jupiter return. So now it's 12 years later, next Jupiter return, and I don't know. I don't think. I mean, I guess some people are traveling. Yeah, I just got out of the hospital though, so it's not traveling isn't the first thing on my mind, right? Um, Dance parties don't look like they're happening in my neck of the woods. Um, and I was thinking, maybe, Jupiter return 2022, it's in my fifth house. Maybe it's a good time to make a lot of music and be really creative and stuff like that. But I'm doing right now, right now at least, when I do my divination work, I do readings on the music that I make. It doesn't look very positive. So, one of the ones I did the other day was, it was, what can I say? I wonder if hopefully, I'm having this moment where I'm like, hopefully this microphone thing is recording properly. It looks like it's going. I wonder if I don't have my headphones on, so I can't hear how well it sounds right now. The other day I did an I Ching on. I asked this question: what direction should I go in with my music making? And I got hexagram 33, which was retreat. And I was reading the Hillary Barrett book, and it was kind of funny because they actually gave for the first line, do not use this as a direction to go in. So it was almost uncanny how to the point it was telling me not to pursue what I was wanting. It was inquiring to pursue. It was not really the question of which direction to go in. Just don't go anywhere in this direction right now. And it's gonna a little bit disappointing because I'm kind of man, I'm finally out of the hospital. I can finally make music, and now the I Ching is saying it's not a good thing to pursue, and I'm it's a bit frustrating, right? Um, and but which leads me to some of these things, which I realized is that this is all from the perspective of where we are right now. I've heard some people say when you do tarot or other I Ching divination that it's not telling you exactly about what the future is going to be. It's basically all from the moment in time. The present moment, and to some extent, is all we have, even as an astrologer, that everything is kind of coming together in the present moment, and that's where you're getting the information from. But there's certain things where the sun squaring Saturn, for one thing, being in my mid 30s, not in my young 20s, and there being a certain kind of thing about electronic music, about the kids getting on Ableton and making dope beats and stuff, and me being yeah, I mean, I still like doing that, but it doesn't quite vibe the same way that it did when I was 22, 23 years old. Now that I'm 34, I'll have my 35th birthday soon. I mean, not to say there's anything wrong with people that are in their 30s that are into this stuff, but at some point it sort of feels like you don't want to get stuck in permanent adolescence too much. And I mean, the other thing too is that I'm aware of is that I wonder, even trying to do a professional astrology thing is just playing out the same problem in a different way, because it's not really a serious job. It's I mean, at least I don't know. It's I guess you could take it. I guess astrology is serious business. Maybe my own character. I've got Saturn combust. And I got Sun, Moon, Saturn conjunction, so that's a combust Saturn in my natal chart. So the quality of Saturn is the seriousness of Saturn can be kind of burnt out, but also very close to my Sun. So, anyways, I'm familiar with the Sun Saturn archetype one way or another. It's in my natal chart as well. But I also recognize that not only this whole thing about I don't know, is this a young man, a young 20 something party thing and I'm maturing beyond that, questions like that. It also, this, even getting a message from the I Ching to basically say do not go in this direction, being kind of given that no, that's a very kind of Sun Saturn thing, being told no, being told to not to stop doing this or whatever. um I decided to check the Wilhelm Baines translation too, because that's what I was normally used to using. I got the Hilary Barrett one on the recommendation of my astrologer friend Spencer Michaud. Hopefully, I'm saying his name right. So yeah, Spencer recommended that Hilary Barrett one in one of his videos. But I went back to the old Wilhelm Baines, and I kind of like the Wilhelm Baines version a bit more, because rather like like rather than it being like this is like the Hillary Barrett, I got this like this is some regressive thing that you need to like move on from and separate yourself from. I kind of got it. The Wilhelm Baines felt more strategic. Maybe as somebody with the Scorpio stuff going on, I can appreciate the strategic, uh, you know, side. But they're saying, what were they saying? It's more like in the commentary, that in certain times, to avoid danger, the best thing you can do is just stay still and not make any action, right? So it's maybe not, maybe for me this was the changing line. So this had the what was the emphasis put on it, right? That maybe rather than, it's an easier pill for me to swallow rather than being like this is just some sort of thing in my past that I have to separate from entirely. I could look at this in a different way that's like, who knows what's going to happen, but maybe it's a good insight right now that it's actually the easiest thing to do is just not to do anything. And if by not doing anything, if I'm conserving my resources, like for example, I'm not just recklessly blowing money on a bunch of shit and then it turns out I have an expense later on and I start to regret me being frivolously spending money when things get into more of a crunch later down the road. Maybe maybe it's just me to get, I'm not saying that that's exactly how it might play out, but there's something coming down the line anyways, that maybe it is just not a good time to put the foot on the gas pedal for that particular pursuit right now, and I don't have to look at it so fatalistically as like I have to like abandon this stuff full on. Or I mean, this could just be my mind trying to work it in such a way that's not so that's I'm sugarcoating the pill, the bitter pill, perhaps. But anyways, there's still I still is a Sun Square Saturn thing where maybe if it's not so harsh, but it's just the sense that it's just not a good time. It's better to wait. It's better to take it slow. And be patient, right? I think the quality of developing patience and not being so impulsive, not going for the quick instant gratification, like that's can be a very Sun Square Saturn kind of archetype. But there's something about it because you want the instant gratification, but there's something about the having to wait, not getting the cookie right away. We're not getting that stimulation, and it can just seem kind of dull and slow and quiet. But I think that's a good side of Saturn too. It's like it's not, when I think about, if I contrast the world of like and these EDM, I'm not really into the EDM label, but these all the big light shows and pyrotechnics and it's like Sun Square Saturn is not like that. It's like you're more of just like you're not getting the sugar instant gratification hits, the easy pleasure. It's like waiting through the slow dull time, getting ready for winter. It's not like this isn't the stuff that like sells Pepsi in commercials or anything like that by any means. This is a different kind of archetype at play. I think they're all good examples of Saturn. I think there's also this quality of like uh, depressive realism, where a lot of people say that people that are depressed are more in tune with reality. And I don't know if I'd agree completely with that, because I think that could just be one side of reality, and that depression might be kind of tunnel vision where you miss out on the things that aren't so depressing. But I think there's a side to it where if you contrast it with something like mania, with mania you might be all inflated, and you might be like, I'm gonna go spend all the money on all the stuff so I can be a rock star and and then I'm gonna do all this, and then eventually you get some sort of reality check, and it's not so great. It brings you back to reality. There's something about depression that seems to sort of like counteract some of our more inflated, flighty, manic tendencies. It's kind of like the poo air. It's kind of like the Icarus, the Icarus who flew too high to the sun or something like that. There's something about the force of Saturn which can be dull, it can be boring, and it can be depressing, but it can bring you back down to earth and focus you in on the less glamorous, less exciting tasks that need to be handled, where it's not all just fun and games. And then, yeah, that could be another thing coming up with the Sun square Saturn. And I'm just kind of reading some notes here. I'm gonna make a jump to a different one here, but one of the things that I haven't been making these videos quite as frequently as I might like. There's been a lot of stuff going on in the skies. We just had a Mars square Pluto as well, and I didn't make any damn video about Mars square Pluto, right? I mean, I'm I have this thing that on one hand I feel very confident about my abilities as an astrologer and my abilities to understand astrology and make delineations and all these kinds of things. But on the other hand, I think it's important for me to stay modest and humble. And the last thing I want to do is feel pressure anyways to get on YouTube recording videos where I'm running my mouth, pretending like I know a bunch of shit, but I'm just bullshitting and making stuff up, and it's not like, maybe I might get lucky once in a while, but I'm not really confident about what it is that I'm saying, right? And Saturn represents, if anything, a kind of ignorance and a kind of a blind spot. And the sun represents the light of awareness, the light of insight, that which makes everything visible and perceivable. And the sun and Saturn alchemically relate to the lead and the gold. So there is something, I think, about a sun square Saturn dynamic that is really coming up against our own ignorance. And I'm the kind of guy who, I like this whole thing. Apparently Socrates was considered the wisest man in Athens, but he also said, all I know is that I know nothing. And that what made him wise was to be aware of his own ignorance, which is to be aware of how much you really don't know. I also came across something from Ram Dass, who passed away. I don't know how long ago it was that Ram Dass passed away, a couple of years ago maybe. But he said that the more he kept doing spiritual work, the more he kept developing his consciousness, whatever you'd want to say. It wasn't like he got more of the answers to everybody's questions. and he felt like a big know-it-all that had all the. It was like the more you did the work, the more he felt like he didn't know anything, right? Like, and but you get more of a sense of peace, maybe, but you don't feel like you have all the. The more expanded you are, you're like, oh shit, I don't actually know anything. So it's like that could be another Sun Square Saturn archetype, is where like you're really like, man, I like Mars Pluto, like rather than rushing to go hop on YouTube and run my mouth about it, like I just sat that one out because I maybe don't have anything to say about Mars Square Pluto. But so now it's with Sun. Yeah, I mean, I've at least managed to come up with some stuff for Sun Square Saturn here, but what I'm saying is even that this kind of attitude where you may not. Yeah, being aware of how much you don't know, or being aware of this blind spot, or being aware of the limits of your own knowledge, your own insight, and having some modesty too, right? I think that's something that maybe another quality of Saturn is like not being the, if it was just untempered, if this was like a Sun Jupiter thing we're talking about, which I guess the Sun is going to square Jupiter too. It could be, being full of confidence, like hot shot, I can do it all kind of thing. But Saturn comes in and tempers that with having the sense of a limit and, putting yourself in perspective with where you stand in relation to other things. And I mean, it can also be maybe like the tall poppy syndrome where somebody kind of gets cut down to size or something like that. These are all Sun Saturn kind of dynamics. And I'm also won't get into this too much, but like I said, I did just get out of the hospital recently, and I think to some extent it's not just like the limitation of what I know or what my insight is, but it's the limitation of my own physicality as I recover from. I was in there for colitis, inflammatory bowel disease. And I'm doing something where I'm trying to I'm going to take my dogs for a walk every day because I was basically immobilized for, months basically, well, at least a couple months. I was not moving around very much, and that's the biggest challenge so far. Getting back to normal life is just my legs just went to all like wobbly knees, like lost my muscles and stuff like that. So I'm like every day going on a bit longer of a walk and getting out there and making sure I'm kind of building myself back up and stuff like that. But I think that's another good Sun Square Saturn dynamic, which is not to be like not not really hitting the wall and giving up entirely, but it's like you're running up against where your limit is, where you don't want to push yourself too hard, but you still want to, like, I still want, I'm trying to recover and try to build myself back up and to get to my optimum physical health, in spite of facing a illness. And that could be applied to other things as well. If when it comes to making, astrology videos or something, like I'm not, some days I just feel exhausted, and then other, like today I'm feeling a bit more peppy, so it seemed like a good time to do this. But yeah, that kind of tension I think is a good example of Sun squaring Saturn. And I guess I just to add to this that now Mars is ingressed into Scorpio, and we're going to be having some Mars square Saturn as well in the month of November. But I think when you could look at all these other things where it's like, I was talking about how you can get frustrated when you're not receiving the instant gratification. Or there's all these different things about coming up against your own limits, whether that be physical or the limits of how much you know or how much you're capable of, or being told that now is not a good time to go ahead with something, all this kind of stuff. There's room in there to become frustrated, to become angry with the situation. And I think that's one thing that we need to watch out for now that Mars is in the mix, because Mars is empowered in its own sign, and it's a morning star now, and it's going to be becoming more visible as time goes on. And Mars could basically just sort of inflame some of the emotions of frustration around all these kind of themes that I've talked about already. There's also going to be eclipses next month, but I'll save that for another video. The new moon is going to be opposing Uranus perfectly, which is pretty intense. But again, maybe I'll talk about that in another video as well. I think this is it for my video on Sun Square Saturn. Thank you for watching.